Hi everybody, I'm Suzi Donahue. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Suzi.
Thought that was going to fit, but it's not. Okay. I love a podium that I'm as tall enough for that I can see over. There's many podiums in AA. I'm like, hey y'all, I need a stool. So, Daniel, thank you for asking me. Merry Christmas to everybody. I'm so glad to be able to say Merry Christmas. Thank you all for letting me come here and just great groceries, as Steve would say. And I love all the decorations and the festive, just the feeling of camaraderie and fellowship. I didn't know this kind of life existed anywhere. It had been so long since I had that kind of, happiness and joyfulness during a holiday time. And you'll hear my story in a minute. My home group is called There's a Solution, and we meet there every Tuesday and Thursday in Holly Springs. If you haven't been there, one way or another, you'll end up there, because like Blake's there tonight, and you guys ended up with me here. So we're a group that we always do a lot of trading, because we're both Three Legacy home groups, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. We meet Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7. If you're ever up in that area, call me. I'll take you out to eat. We'll get to a meeting, or vice versa. Go to the meeting, then eat. But I'd love to, bring you to our home group anytime. And my sobriety date is September 29th, 1987. I got sober in Seattle, Washington. You'll hear a little bit about that. And I have been sponsored since my very first night in AA. I got a sponsor at a detox, and I'm ever grateful that I just said yes a couple of times. So I'll get into my story. We always talk about what it was like, how we are. I kind of like page 29 better than that, and probably because I'm a rebel. I don't know. Even if I don't have a cause, I like being a rebel. But it says on 29, it says, each individual in their personal stories describes in their own language and from their own point of view the way they establish their relationship with God. And in the original manuscript, it actually says, how we found or came about finding it again. Because many of us came here with a broken relationship with God. That was me. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. So I was raised right. I'll tell you, man, I had good family. I wasn't raised by wolves. I wasn't some poor child that didn't know right from wrong. My father was a doctor and a dentist. My mother was a psychologist. Her pet project was to figure out what was wrong with Suzi. And it was usually I was chubby and didn't have a boyfriend. But, my mom did a lot of home therapy. I'll leave it at that. Both my parents were drinkers. We lived in a beautiful neighborhood. I learned how to golf by the time I was 8. I'm left-handed, but they decided to save the money on the golf clubs and taught me how to golf right-handed. Didn't seem to faze me. I learned. I had 2 older brothers, and life looked pretty good. I knew when a season changed, I'd get a winter coat, spring coat, fall coat, summer, lightweight shirt. So I knew kind of what was going on in life. Everything looked pretty good from the outside. But I tell you, there was a lot going on in that home, and the reason I talk about that, when I first came to AA, I had one of these up here. I'm sure you met none of us girls like this, where we have a story. Anyway, my story came from my childhood. The reason I thought I drank when I came here was because of my parents drinking. And both my parents, my father was a night drinker. He worked all day, 7 days a week sometimes, but always drank at night. My mother, she drank all day long. And as time progressed, by the time I was about 8 years old, I was doing dishes, then making dinner, and pretty soon doing all, taking care of my brothers, doing the laundry. 9 years old, the baby comes. We got one more baby in the house, and now he's in my room, and I become mom as well. And so, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way other people live normally like that, but my mom was drunk all the time, so I always put that in the back of my head. If I ever drank like that, that would be a problem. Because my mom would be the kind of drinker where the paramedics kind of knew our house. They'd drive down the street, and they'd see my mom, and she'd have fire literally in her hair, and she'd be trying to put the hair, because she was trying to light a cigarette on the stove back in the day. She'd light her hair on fire, and then the neighbors would find her outside trying to roll it off, and the paramedics would come, and those were the kind of crises I grew up in. So I saw what alcohol could do to a family. So I always kind of checked that in the back of my head if I ever get like that, But I loved alcohol. I thought it was very exciting, very attractive. There were all the clinking glasses, the beautiful beaded gowns, all the parties that my family, they all went to. We had parties at our house. I'd walk around with a little ashtray dumper and dump all the ashtrays for all the rich people. I loved it, man. I couldn't wait to drink legally, right? And I'm the girl that, the next morning, 6 o'clock, 6, 7 in the morning, I'd get up to watch cartoons, and there'd be drinks all over the tables, And I'd drink that bourbon, that, deep amber liquid, and I'd drink it, and it would go down my throat, and it'd be warm. And I remember that feeling. I like that warmth. And, that's kind of weird maybe for a 6-year-old, but that's just the way my life was as a young girl. And then, I had a really, a nice, relationship with God. I wanted to be a saint or an angel. I went to church every Sunday. My father's best friend was a Catholic priest, so I knew all about God. I had it all down, and I believed in God, and I prayed to God to fix my family. And, that wasn't happening in my timely manner. It just wasn't working out the way I liked. And my 2 older brothers, one day, they asked me if they'd go up and hang out with some of their friends at the school. And that was the first time that I had a real chance to drink. And, this cute boy that I just thought was, better than sliced bread. He was so handsome. And I thought, oh, my God, if they let me sit with him, everything will be good, And those other girls, I don't care. I won't have to worry that I think I'm not as skinny as they are. I won't have to worry I'm not as pretty as they are. I won't have to worry that they don't want to be with me. They don't like me. All the I don'ts, I'm not good enough. I always had that in my head the whole time as a young girl. I remember playing cello in 2nd grade. I was second cello, not first. You know what I mean? I always had that less than feeling in me. I know none of you can relate to that, but I would always think of that kind of secondary thing, and I was always filled with fear. But when I was there that night with those boys, and they handed me a couple Mickey Wide Mouth beers, and there was a 4-pack, and I'll never forget it. I drank 2 like lightning, like whoo, topped them. And I never saw that in my family. They didn't drink like that. But I just downed them both, and I was like, whoo, took my head off. I mean, I felt it. I was lit up. I was excited. And alcohol usually calms people down. They're like, well, that was lovely, dear. Let's head to bed. You know what I mean? But you and me, I'm like, whoo, let's go to a bad neighborhood. Woo! I'm like lit up, And what happens when I drink like that, I immediately want more. And that boy, he was on his first one still. And I remember trying to, kind of wager for that 3rd beer. Whatever you want to do, let's get that 3rd beer over this way, And my brothers, my 2 older brothers, they were like 2 and 3 years older than me. I guess they were out scouting for me for about 3 hours that night. And they found me on the side of the school in the woods. And my shirt was buttoned kind of funny like this. And I had vomit on one shoe, and the other foot had vomit on it, but the shoe was gone. And my brothers brought me back home, and, a girl usually 12 years old, she'd be probably pretty humiliated, probably think, oh, my God, I shouldn't drink alcohol. I'm thinking it was just the wrong alcohol, you know what I mean? It just wasn't a good night, didn't get, things happened that I hadn't planned on. But I remember the feeling immensely. I remember that feeling of having my head just lit on fire. Like, I was excited. I was fused up. I didn't care about all those girls that made fun of me. I didn't care how fat or thin they were. I didn't care how fat or thin I was. I was free. And I remember that feeling of freedom. And within a couple of days, I was drinking every weekend. I was a weekend warrior before I was 13 years old. And I had older brothers, like I said, so we hung out with older kids. So sometimes we'd have kids 17, 18, 19 years old hanging out with a 12-year-old, which is today illegal, by the way. But, that's kind of what we did. And, I was the girl that would go to a kegger, and I'd have 2 red Solo cups. Not 1, but 2. I wasn't going to miss out on any, And I'm the kind of girl that would go into a house, and I'd see you guys had a bunch of bottles of wine, and I'd grab 1 or 2 on the way to the bathroom and put them in your closet and leave them there, and later on go back to the bathroom and grab them, put them under my coat, and walk out with them so I had something for later. I mean, early on, I was looking at supply and demand. My demand, your supply, And that was kind of what I was. I was somebody that was, early on, I looked for opportunities. I was an opportunistic drinker, And I was the kind of person that when I drank sometimes, I drank too much too fast. And a lot of people, it was disappointing, I guess, to some of the kids I was with. They would put me over their shoulder, my brother, their friends, and they'd drag me to the back of the pickup truck and throw me in there and be like, oh, my God, she's out again. You know what I mean? Suzi, out again, laying on the pool table, out again. That was like my story, out again, passed out. And, by 9 o'clock, I'm not a fun drinker. Do you know what I mean? So in walks this guy with a leather jacket, and he's always going to the bathroom. I thought he had a colon problem, but it was actually a coke problem. So, and I thought he was really handsome, and I couldn't wait to meet him, of course. And so when we got together, I thought it was great. I heard he didn't drink, and I thought, that's great. He'll be able to take care of me, because I really kind of need some tendon, you know what I mean? I knew I had a problem already. 15 years old, I had already ran away from home. My father had killed himself, drove off a cliff, drunk. I'd already walked away from my family. I'd walked away from God by then. In a very short couple of years, I went from being, a weekend warrior to finally a daily drinker at about 16 years old. I was a runaway. You couldn't hold me down. You couldn't make me live in that house. There was no way I was going back there. I had that kind of attitude as a young kid, and I lived with homeless kids downtown, and I got the rest of my education through a program for homeless kids, and I graduated with honors at 16 and tried to go into, college, and I passed a test, and I got into a really good school in California, but once again, I go to the Green Dolphin the night before I'm supposed to get on the bus, and, I'm the girl that can't seem to show up, and at the Green Dolphin, I decided to play a couple of games of pool, because by now I'm a pool shark. I deemed that myself, by the way. I think I am anyway. And a couple of guys take me for some money and some other things, and I end up drunk and passed out. And 3 days later, I'm on the freeway in a van with people I've never met in my life, and we're driving, and I see this sign, Dallas-Fort Worth, downtown. I was in Seattle that night, 3 days before that. I was never so frightened, but I passed it off like, oh, I know people here. So, they pulled over and let me out. And it took me almost 3 weeks to work in a restaurant to a woman that, just felt sorry for me, and she let me sleep in the restaurant. And she gave me somewhere to sleep and food to eat, and literally she let me buy a ticket, 3 weeks of work, and she bought me a ticket home. But those are the kind of things that were happening to me. And that may not be your story, but that's the way I drank. I just was all, balls to the wall, drank all the time like that. And, alcoholically, I knew already that I had that propensity. I saw what alcohol could do in a family. I lived through it. But like I said, I always had that vision in my mind. If I'm dead drunk on the floor with a bottle of Jim Beam and my hair's on fire, that's a problem. Do you know what I mean? I just knew that was going to be kind of my idea. And I really didn't want to believe that alcohol was, an issue at that point. I was young, 17, 18 years old, just beginning my life. And I blew it in California. Now, a regular student probably would have called the school and said, I messed up, I have a problem, I might need a semester off. But my ego is so inflated at that point, I decide I don't like California and those tree-loving hippies, right? And I decide I don't want to go there. And it's not true. I'm sure none of you have done this where you've screwed up and decided you didn't really want it anyway, right? Well, and that started kind of happening in my life. I got a job at the university. And I'd last, I could type and I could do a couple of, things on those big computers back in the day. And they would hire me for a period of time. But my problem was they want the rent on the 1st. And I can't pay till about the 15th anywhere. And then the job, they want me there every day at 8. And I got an issue with 8 a.m. I just don't do well. There's times when I'm still awake partying at 6 a.m. And I remember one particular night I was taking my suit off and ironing it and wearing the same suit I had on the day before and just ironed it thinking nobody's going to tell that I'd been up for 48 hours, But that's what I would do, try to go to work and be a normal person. And I tell you about this story because it was one effort after another effort to try to control my drinking. And that idea as long as I don't drink in the morning, I won't be like my mother. As long as I, don't get into any trouble or, have a paramedics or any agency after me, I'll be fine. And, I just kept dropping these things. Every once in a while I'd be up for 2 or 3 days, so then it was fine to drink in the morning. Every once in a while, I'd start to have these kind of weird shaky feelings. And I was getting the flu all the time. I couldn't figure out what it was. My hands would get kind of sweaty. And I'd kind of get this internal shake. And I was like, damn, I can't have the flu 3 times in a month. There's something going on here. And I didn't know it. And this girl, she was a drinker like I was. And she said, girl, you ain't got the flu. And I was like, well, what is it? My hands are always shaking. And I had to have somebody tell me what that was. That I was actually in withdrawal. I had no idea. I'd be in work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'd be, trying to finish up and try to get out of there thinking I could get a drink when I was done. And I swear by 3:45, I got a fever. And by 4 p.m., I'm nauseous, and I just puked in the bathroom. I didn't, but I'm telling my manager I just threw up. And she lets me go home, and I run down the alley into the back of the Chinese restaurant and get a couple of drinks so that I feel okay. That's the way I drink. And by the time I was 22 years old, and that man, I was still with him most days, and we were going all around the country. We'd already used all his friends, my family, my mother. We even had my mother robbed. Well, not legally robbed, but just the garage robbed. But anyway, we robbed her garage. A lot of it went to the pawn shop. It was my father's old tools and things. Something I always just, never goes away, the feeling of knowing that you can rob your own family. But I got to that place. And then I realized, I must have something wrong with me. I must have some mental case. I don't know, something's up. So then I go see a psychiatrist, and within a couple of minutes of answering simply, do you have trouble sleeping at night? Oh, yes. And then another one, are you finding that you have difficulty with authority? Absolutely. And then I think the last one was, are you having high highs and low lows? That was me. Now, I never mentioned I had a cocaine problem and I'd been up for 3 days. I never talked to him that I drank every day. See, with professionals, we rarely tell the truth. And that poor man diagnosed me. He said I had a schizoid disorder and I was bipolar. Back then, they called it manic depressive. I wasn't. I never have been. Some people are. It's not true to my story. But I took that medicine because what I got with it was a little certificate that homeless people like me that were mentally ill could get free housing. And so I took that housing. I didn't care that I might have been taking that from somebody else. Because that's what happened to the value system and the morals that I had. I had been raised right. I'd been raised with a God of my understanding. I knew better than that, but I could not live that way. I could not make a good choice anymore. I would go for anything that was easy and simple and quick for a drink and an easier way out. And finally, there was a couple of times when I'd be laying around thinking, gosh, I got a problem. I know I need to quit. And then something would come up, and then, somebody'd walk in with a 6-pack of beer or something, and I'd start right in. Or I'd do my famous, after going to jail a couple of times, had little hot hands once in a while. I'd go to jail for drunken disorderly or for, trying to steal something. I was a bad thief. I got caught. I never even got the thing, But anyway, I'd get caught and go to jail. And by Sunday morning, I'm praying with everybody at church, at jail. I'm like, praise God and reading scripture and everything. And, at the time, I meant it. I wanted a different life in jail. I did. I was in jail. I wanted a different life. Then when I'd get out, by 10 in the morning, I'd be across the street drinking with people from the jail that I was just praising Jesus with. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but with all my heart, I wanted to be done on Sunday. I really did. Friday night, Saturday, I was only going to drink Michelob Light on weekends. That was my treatment plan. Sunday, I was going to church with all the people in the jail. And then something changed. And that something that changed was, page 24 in our book. It talks about we don't have sufficient force. So the memory of the suffering a week or a month ago were without defense against a drink. And, I kept seeing that happen where if it was put in front of me, I just couldn't say no. If I had an opportunity to go get it, if I had money in my pocket, all bets were off. I would just go get more. I could not keep myself stopped. I was drinking against my will. And then there would be another night where I'd think, I really got to do something about it tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's over. I'm not drinking any. And by mid-afternoon, I'd be drunk again. And finally there was this day I was in a trailer. And, a trailer is a nice way of saying basically it's one of those old Thunderbird trailers in the back of the trailer that are laying on the ground that aren't on wheels anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's where we were living. We were like sitting in a house that didn't have any electricity. And we were in there doing, I'll just be honest, doing drugs and drinking. And I'd been in there for about, I think, a day and a half to 2 days. And somehow I had won a free pizza, or lied probably and got a free pizza. But anyway, there was a pizza box on the table, and there were bottles of Old English on the floor. My boyfriend and his female drug dealer were in the bathroom, and the sun was coming up. It's probably 5 in the morning, 5:30, whatever, real light. And end of September, the light, was starting to come early. And I remember hearing birds chirp and thinking, another day, another day. And there was this man and woman, and they were getting out of their trailer in the nice part of the trailer park. And, they had a baby, and he kissed the baby, and he gave the baby back to his wife. And I thought, I'll never have that. I'll never have a baby. I'll never have a family. I'll never have a man that loves me. All I love is alcohol. And I just said, dear God, help me. And I'd never said the God word since my father died. And that was 12 years before that. And I just kind of hung my head, and then I heard this voice, and it was like it was in the back of my head, blown into my head, pick up the phone. And I looked around, and there was no one behind me. And they were still in the bathroom. There was no one else. No one was in that trailer. And I heard it a second time. Pick up the phone. And back in 1987, there was a phone that had buttons and an operator that answered. And I pulled the cord and got the phone in front of me and picked it up and pushed a 0. And this woman said, can I help you? And I just burst into tears, and I said, I'm killing myself. I'm drinking myself to death. Please help me. And she said, oh, honey, everything's going to be okay. And I believed her. Something about her, I believed her. And then, I don't know if any of you have overshared before, but it all came out like, I'm doing drugs, I'm putting stuff in my arms, I'm stealing things, I'm lying, I had my mother robbed, and all of a sudden I realized what I'm doing. I'm like, I got to go. And I put the phone down thinking, the cops are going to come. I mean, the cops know me at Safeway when I'm street scamming. They're going to come. They know me. Suzi, they know me, So I'm waiting for the cops to come. And I yell into the bathroom, the cops are coming! And they run out with the dope, they're out the door, the boyfriend, with the female drug dealer that I think is just a friend, which obviously isn't, because I never saw him again, thank you very much. He was going to marry me, remember? But anyway, he was gone. So I'm laying there, and I'm waiting for the squad, like the whole, SWAT team maybe. I'm thinking I'm that important. SWAT team didn't come, nobody came. So the phone rang in, and that was not pleasant, but I figured it was probably the cops. And I'm like, yep. And the guy goes, my name is Ron. I'm with King County Detox. Is there anyone there that wants help now? And I said, yeah, I want some help. And he says, well, I got a bed, and it's only available to 9:30, so you either get here or I'll give it to somebody that wants it. I've never been talked to like that. Like today, what we do is we're like, can I get you an Uber and a breakfast sandwich? On the way to detox, right? But nobody did that for me. He was like, you get here and claim your bed, or I'll give it to someone that wants it. So I got up off the ground. I grabbed that bottle of Old English for courage. I went up to the top of the street. It was a Sunday. Rarely was there any buses, but maybe once every hour or two. And a bus, I'm not kidding you, a bus just appeared. God goes before me. And I didn't know it. I got on that bus, and the man looked at me, and I said, I'm going to detox. And he looked at me, and he said, drink it in the back. And all the way downtown, nobody got on that bus. 15 stops, nobody got on that bus. I got to detox, I put the bottle in the garbage. And I walked in there, and they weighed me. I weighed 89 pounds. I had 4 teeth left on the top of my mouth, nothing left. They think I hadn't eaten in 5 days and probably hadn't had water in 4 other than what I put in my arms. And they told me I was in bad shape, and I knew that because I couldn't swallow. I had sores in my throat. And I was having a hard time swallowing, so they give me peanut butter and jelly. I don't know where that came from. That's a bright idea, Here, let's give it to the kid that can't swallow, So I think they didn't know what to do with me, so they put me in an AA meeting. And it was almost over with, I think. And I didn't go in there and go, oh, I'm home. No, I didn't do that, It didn't seem comfortable. There were people in clean clothes. There was, you could see the cars outside through the walls with the bars, but the cars weren't dented. People smelled good. They were happy. They're all walking around, like that. You know how we are at detox. And, it was just a little too happy for me, a little frightening. But I just kind of stayed there. And then this woman said to another girl, like where Daniel, she said, I haven't had a drink or anything else in 10 years. I'm free. And that was the last thing she said. It was the end of the meeting. And I just said, I said another word. I said, that's crap. And she looked at me. She goes, what's your name, honey? And I hate that when they call you honey, But I said, my name's Suzi. And she said, are you done for good and all? Have you had enough yet? Nobody ever asked me that. I said, yeah, I think I've had enough. She said, are you willing to go to any lengths in Alcoholics Anonymous to stay sober and stay alive? And I said, yeah, I'll try. And then she said, are you willing to believe in God? And she could just see the wheels turn. And I'm thinking, sundresses, I can't dance anymore, can't go out with boys, I can't have to go to Sunday school, I get, all that's going on in my head. I don't believe in God, he doesn't like me. All the old ideas are stirring. She says, stop. She goes, good, orderly direction, group of drunks. Can you do that? And I said, I can do that. And so then she came across, all the way across the hall to me, or the room to me, and she had a piece of paper in her hand. I like, great, of all these guys, I get one female phone number. Like, that's great, I wasn't excited, but it wasn't a phone number. It was an address to an AA meeting. She said, if you're serious and you want this way of life, I'll take you through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, line by line, word for word. And I'll help you have a psychic change so that you never, ever think about a drink again. You'll be free. And you never have to fail ever again. It can be gone. You can have permanent recovery. And I was dumbfounded. And I said, how do I do that? And she said, meet me, but be on time. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this address. You get there at 7, the meeting starts at 8:30. And again, she said, don't be late. And 2 days later, I got out. And I went Wednesday night. And sure enough, she was sitting at the bar. They had like a big coffee bar. And she did this. She came over and she said, this is what you know about alcoholism. And it was a blank page. And I said, yeah, that's probably accurate. And she said, I'm going to go ahead and read the book to you out loud. And I was like, oh, I've gone to college. Because I'm so arrogant. I was like, I can read, fine. She goes, no, you don't seem to understand. I'm going to help you by letting you come to find yourself in the pages of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't tell you you're an alcoholic. You need to identify by seeing yourself here. And hopefully you'll want what we found. And you'll be willing to pass it on to somebody else. And I was like, well, I don't know about all that. She said, well, I'm going to tell you now, I'm not going to work with you if you don't work with other women. And I was like, wait, can we get sober first? Like here, Because I thought that was a little bit pushy, She said, you don't understand, there's people dying of alcoholism in that detox we were at the other night. She said, if you don't want this, I'm going to go work with someone that really does. And I said, no, I'll do it. Because I did want to do it. With all of me, I wanted to do it. So she took me through the book, and, in a very short period of time, I began to see myself, not only in the doctor's opinion that I had that mental obsession, that all the time thinking about the Chinese restaurant. I didn't just like Chinese food. I was thinking about the drinks. I was at work hours before I could ever even get a drink, and I'm dreaming about it. I would be thinking about what it would be like to have a couple of drinks after work. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, folks. Those were the kind of thoughts that I had. That was obsessive, no doubt. And when somebody brought something around, I couldn't get it out of my mind. I had to have it. And the allergy, I didn't understand that I had an allergy. I really didn't get that whole allergy thing. It sounded kind of cool, but I didn't really understand what that meant. But an adverse reaction is an allergy. And I remember the very first time I drank, I puked everywhere. That's pretty adverse, Most of us have these reactions to alcohol, but over time, our body adjusts. And pretty soon, I can handle more and more alcohol, and I did. But I had an adverse reaction. Today, if I had done something and took a pill from the doctor and I puked on my shoes, I'd be like, I'm not taking that again. But not with alcohol. Come on down, let's have some more. Let's puke again. That's how I was with alcohol. So I knew something was off. So this book started to speak to me. And then when she started bringing me through the third step, I was like, oh no, what is this whole God stuff? I'm not sure if I really believe in that, because, I'm thinking it's all mystic and wonderful. They're talking spiritual, doesn't have to be religious. And I was like, I had a very religious upbringing, and it didn't work, basically, is what I explained to my sponsor. She's like, well, I really didn't need that information about you. As a matter of fact, it really doesn't matter to me that was your opinion about your family's opinion about God. So it's not even your experience with God, Suzi. It's somebody else's opinion you've been dragging around all this time. And I started thinking, well, that is kind of somebody else's opinion. I was in that church that day. They were burying my father, and the people behind me were saying that my father couldn't be forgiven because he killed himself. It was their opinion that I carried with me. See, my conception of God as a child, it was just wrong. It was self-centered. I didn't realize that the God, my childhood, he let me run around all over the country, stealing, lying, cheating, and waited for me to come to AA. My father never got a chance to come to AA. He killed himself before. But our God let, our fathers and all those people in our lives that we were disappointed over, God allowed them to go through their own path, to have their own free will, just like he gave me the ability to have my free will. And when I got here, I've never had to leave. And, that's a pretty cool thing. The woman that I worked with, my first sponsor, her name, was Cheryl. And, it's kind of funny. Her and her partner were the first folks in Seattle to ever have a building company, and they were very successful. So I was watching, people that were putting their life together and that were really going somewhere. And I didn't really believe like this whole God thing yet. And she kept telling me, I don't care if you don't believe. I'm just going to ask you to take some simple actions of other sober people. Could you do that? And I said, yeah. So she asked me to come to the meeting an hour before. And I thought that was ridiculous. An hour? What for on earth? And I said, I said, I'm not making coffee because you can't get near that coffee pot. That guy's always making coffee. He don't need no help. She said, we want you to set up chairs with Charlie. Now, Charlie was the guy that would set all the chairs up, right? He'd let you set a few up, and then he'd go behind you and straighten them perfectly in a row. But he wouldn't ever let you see that he was re-straightening them all. But, so I would sit with Charlie, and I would go early, and I would set up the meeting. But the thing about Charlie is he was a good listener. And I didn't know how to listen. I just knew how to talk. I'm sure none of you are like that. But he would just listen, and he would just love me. Sometimes he'd bring candy and stuff because he knew I didn't have any money, and I was living in like a recovery house. And then little things started to happen. Like I said, God goes before us. It was about time for me to get out of this recovery house, and I had done a pretty solid 4th and 5th step, and it was Christmas time, and we had put on a big party like this for the Christmas holidays, and there was another present left under the tree for the kids, and I'm yelling, Suzi, because the present says Suzi. I'm going, Suzi, and there's nobody coming, no little kid named Suzi. And I'm like, well, I don't know where she went, I don't know what to say. And my sponsor's like, no, it's for you. And she had heard my 5th step, I opened it up, and I started to cry. It was a train. And when I had told her my 5th step, I said, as a little kid, I always wanted a train set. My brothers always got the train. And, all 3 of my brothers all got train sets. I never did. But that was just a silly resentment I'd had, and she'd remembered that. So that train, when my son grew up, I gave it to him, but it used to be under our Christmas tree every year. It would be a reminder of what God can do, But it was just a cool thing. So here I'm sitting here thinking about, having this train set. And I'm thinking about, what a wonderful Christmas it is. And I haven't talked to my family or anything. I'm trying to make amends now, and I go about writing my mom a letter because she lives 2,000 miles from where I do. And you know how we are. We write it out. I was wrong. I was unkind, insensitive. I stole. I lied. I had money. I put money in the envelope. I mailed it off. And it took about 2.5 weeks, and the letter came back. Returned to sender. My mom wouldn't read it. So it took about, I think, almost 3 years for me to save from that year, 2 more years to save and get the money to go and actually do a formal amends in front of my mom. But it was really powerful because, like I said, 17 years later, she passed, and the family asked me to do the eulogy. And now, when I first got sober, my mom and I were like on 2 ends of the world. We couldn't be in the same room. We couldn't talk, and every year that she wouldn't talk to me, I would still write letters every month. And I would still call every Sunday at 2 o'clock. And she wouldn't accept them. And then after the amends, she started accepting them. And then pretty soon she started just doing small things like, inviting my son when I got married and had a baby. She invited my son to come and stay with her and stuff like that. And little small things that we were able to build, a future. And my mom was still a drinker, by the way. And a lot of people ask me, do we have to make amends to people that drink? You know, and it's really been an experience for me, super important. I'm so grateful that my mom was still drinking when I was able to make that amends to her. It didn't matter. My sponsor said best chances is probably around 11 in the morning. And that's when I went, and I made an appointment with my own mother, and I made that amends. But the point was, yes, people deserve an amends no matter their condition, no matter their mental health, no matter their physical allergies, no matter any other problems they might have, including alcoholism. That, you know, it was probably one of the most powerful things to see that my mom was living a life to the best of her ability. She got sick later on in her life, and they ended up realizing she was an alcoholic in the hospital because she went through withdrawal. And luckily, you know, somebody figured that out, one of the doctors. She could have died. But they figured it out, and my mom came out of there and never ever drank again. And I remember I asked my mom point blank, you know, we got pretty close by then. I said, what made you stop drinking finally all these years? She said, Suzi, I had an angel come to me in the hospital and tell me I don't have to drink anymore. And from that day on, that was enough. Well, that wasn't my story. So I had to continue working with other people, and that was what my sponsor was big on. So it had been like 4.5, 5 months, I think, and I got my first sponsee. I was terrified. I was like, there's no way I can do this. I'll probably ruin her life. You know how we are. We're so self-consumed. I could ruin somebody's life, you know, saying the wrong thing, you know. And, you know, my sponsor said, you don't got enough power to ruin somebody's life, you know. She said, you know, and besides, God goes before you. Just pray. She said, you know what I do? Every time we meet, I take your little hands and I pray with you. So do the same thing. So I took her little hands and I prayed with her and I started reading the book. And I'll never forget, you know, come her fifth step, the first fifth step I ever listened to. I remember she said something pretty serious, you know, and I said, I'll be right back. And I grabbed that phone with the cord and ran into the bathroom and dialed up my sponsor and told her. And I'm like, I don't know what to say to her. I'm crying. I'm going to ruin that. You know, and she said, just love her. You know, just be kind to her. Just talk with her. Just hug her. Just be there. Give her some candy. You know what I mean? Just general, just calmed me down and everything went fine. But, you know, I was always so worried that I would fail somehow. And I'm here to tell you, you can't fail. Failing is by not doing it. And it's been my experience to date that the greatest gift I've ever been given is I've not been without a sponsee since I got sober. I've never not had a sponsee, ever. And that's not like, look at me. It's just, I'm probably so messed up I need them. Do you know what I mean? I'm such a bad case like Steve talks about. I got to have people in my life to work with. It's a requirement. It's our 12th step. You know, chairing a meeting is a wonderful thing. It's a great part of being a part of your home group. You know, making cookies. I used to do that all the time for the meetings. Do a lot of service work in the, you know, general service and all kinds of things. I've been sponsored into service my whole sobriety. But there is nothing like our primary purpose. AA's existence solely is to carry the message from one alcoholic to another. And we don't have to sponsor people to do that. But that intensive work with another alcoholic, by far, it's not just saves the day in a bad spot, it gives me the light of God. That's what happens. You know, me sitting in my bedroom every morning and praying and asking God to be with me and trying to meditate and learn all the latest tricks on how to get closer to God, none of that has ever changed me. I firmly believe that the defects of character, God has removed them solely when I'm working with someone else. It's not been so that I can become a better person or look at me. You know, it's so that I can bear witness. God is going to remove my difficulties so you guys can see what God can do in a life like mine. That's what God's doing. It's not like, oh, Suzi Donahue is filled with the Spirit. That might sound fun and cute on Facebook, but that's not what it is. He has literally taken away my difficulties so you can believe that he's real. And that's what's happened here tonight. You know, this moment of us telling our story is the most profound piece of Alcoholics Anonymous history that we have. And to be a guardian for AA is to simply, any of you guys could come up here and tell your story and it would be just beautiful. Because each of us have been given a story. You know, the first part of the mess you heard, that was my story. The rest of it is God's story. And that's what's happened here. You know, this comes from, it's an accumulation of people working together, caring about each other, coming together and thinking about other people. That's what comes inside of AA that people don't understand, that magic. You know, it's not just good groceries or fun, you know, let's all go roller skating. Those are wonderful things. But true fellowship is serving the person sitting next to you, serving another person. That's the value of this way of life. And we get closer to God together. And that kind of unified front, it can solve any problem. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous is so utterly powerful. You know, I had a friend in North Raleigh, and always talks about AA is just a little bit more powerful than alcoholism. You know what? And I beg to differ a little bit. I think AA is a lot more powerful than alcoholism, or wouldn't all of us be sitting here tonight? You know, I think about the woman that was there the night that I came to detox and interrupted her. By the way, here I am interrupting some woman that had, 15 years of sobriety, and I'm interrupting her, But if she had not come that night, if she'd been too busy with her brand new business, if she had said, you know what, it's not good for me to go to the service commitment tonight. I'm going to stay home with my wife, We're going to just have a little dinner tonight. We haven't seen each other much this week. If she just said that, none of you that spoke that night, nothing personal, would have been able to bear witness to me what I needed to hear. And I never doubt how purposeful your words are in a meeting. You'll never know because you were there. That's why other people have stayed. So I want to say thank you and Merry, Merry Christmas.